So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming and spending time with us today. We got a great panel here. We got Gunnar Hellickson, who's the Vice President and General Manager of the Red Hat Enterprise Business Unit. And we've got Mark Skarpness, who runs all the engineering and SATG around open source ecosystem. All right, just to do a quick soft opener, and then we're going to have Gunnar walk through a couple slides. Do you want to talk about what was announced today on stage with Greg real quick?
Yeah.
And then we can go through these.
Well, actually, that's what that's all I'm gonna end with.
All right.
Yeah. So should I just go then? Or
All right.
up to you. Is there any you want to wind it up? You're good.
No. All right. Yeah, let's not wind it up anymore. Let's go.
Okay. I'm gonna stand up. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Morning, everybody. I'm gonna subject you to about 15 minutes of exposition on some more detail on what Greg and I talked about on stage this morning. And really, I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about this. We have been partners forever. Over 25 years probably, pretty close.
Since the beginning of Red Hat.
Yeah, that's right. But this is we were just talking about this at the reception last night. This feels qualitatively different. Something has changed in the relationship, and I think it's largely due to some intention on Intel's part. And it just so happens that it coincides with some changes in our own collaboration strategies, and kind of the two of these things are coming together in what I think is a really fun and really interesting way. So first this is intimidating as a slide, bear with me, I will make it consumable, I promise. I'm gonna give you a little bit of history about how we used to work. When Red Hat first started building Linux, raise your hand if you remember us being sold for $30 at Best Buy, at the retailer, right? Okay, that was where we started. And our number one revenue stream from that was, anybody know how we made our money? Hats and t-shirts. We sold hats and t-shirts with the logo on it, and that was our primary revenue stream. But we were very, very popular. And what we discovered actually that we had two kinds of customers. One, which was folks like me, who were developers in their proverbial basements, who needed a ready-to-use Linux so they could build a web server, the thing that they wanted to do. And enormous multinational banks running Oracle databases on Intel. Turns out it's very hard to make both of these audiences happy. And so we split the work. We said that we're going to create Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and we're going to create Fedora Linux. And lots of differences between the two of them, but the big one from a developer point of view is that Fedora was going to update every 6 months. It was taking the latest and greatest from the upstream and putting it into a consumable format for the kind of hobbyist and developer user. And then there was going to be another version which was going to update every 3 years and sometimes 5 and sometimes 6 years. We were going to do a Red Hat Enterprise Linux release, and we were going to commit to supporting that for a really long time. This model satisfied us for years. And as I talked about in the keynote, there was a big change between hybrid cloud, AI, security, the appetite for customers to get early access to innovation, and partners getting early access to innovation is enormous. And we could offer folks Fedora, which was updating every 6 months, and that's interesting as kind of a place to see what's happening, but not interesting as a place of actually building something worthwhile, something enduring, right? In order to do that, you need something that looks a lot like a product that is going to be supported for a long period of time, which is Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So we created this kind of third category. Internally, we've been calling midstream. I'm not sure if that's going to stick or not, but we created this thing called CentOS Stream, which sits in between the Fedora and the Red Hat Enterprise Linux releases. And a good way of thinking about CentOS Stream is that this is Red Hat taking 99% of the work that we did internally, entirely inside Red Hat's walls, and we're now doing it in public. So CentOS Stream is literally, you're watching day to day all the code commits of the Red Hat engineers as we're building the next version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Now, I like this in kind of a philosophical way because this kind of aligns us with our openness and our transparency principles. But as a practical matter, it turns out this is extremely useful for doing early enablement, especially in a multi-partner environment, which is another thing you heard about in the keynote this morning, is for 25 years, they have been building delicious hardware, and then we have been lighting it up with the operating system, and then we ship it to the market and cross our fingers, and 6 to 9 months later, somebody ends up figuring out what to do with it, right? With the advent of this CentOS stream, this gives us an opportunity to do this enablement earlier, do it with multi-party enablement of these hardware features, so that when the next version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux releases, then we're there with Intel, we're there with Nginx, I mentioned earlier, we're there with Guys AI, which I mentioned earlier, right? So this is a way of getting innovations into the ecosystem as a way of accelerating kind of the time to market, or really the time to benefit from a lot of these capabilities that Intel's building. Does all of that make sense? Cool. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so that was the fertile ground on which this new collaboration started. We suddenly realized, oh wait, Intel has this interest in expanding their ecosystem and getting things into market earlier. We have a way of doing that, so okay, fine. What is it specifically that we're going to do? And that's where this collaboration came together. And the idea here is to allow us to figure out earlier where these capabilities that we're jointly building together can be applied in the market. And there's some obvious targets for this, right? First thing, and what every customer asks us about, is performance, right? So just baseline performance, right? If we can do all the performance tuning ahead of time with all the partners necessary, then great, right? Now everybody is kind of putting their best foot forward when we release the software. The second area where we're collaborating is on AI, right? So this is again, lighting up the GPU is one thing, making sure we have the right drivers in place, that's one thing, but actually making sure the GPU is in a usable state when we actually ship the product. Prog Young back here is nodding vigorously because she's responsible for making sure this happens. Making sure the GPU is actually in a usable state for developers and for partners is extremely important, and not work that you want to start after you ship the product. Because once you ship the product, it is too late. You need to do it beforehand. CentOS Stream is where we're going to go do that. Second area of collaboration is on Edge. And so here I would say that a lot of this work is around OpenVino and making sure that we have the Red Hat Device Edge products can work together with OpenVino and actually create good components that could be used in a broader AI solution on the device edge. I should mention too that all this work on AI, all this work on Edge, accrues not just to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but also to all the products that rely on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, including OpenShift and OpenShift AI. Right? So as long as we're doing it as long as it's all figured out on RHEL, then it becomes a lot easier to go figure it out on the higher order products. Right? The last place where we're collaborating is on security, and this is one that's close to my heart. I spent 10 years in Red Hat's public sector group and became endlessly frustrated with all of this great hardware that Intel was shipping in order to enable security, and nobody could figure out how to use it. Right? And I'm considering it kind of my personal mission, like this is the opportunity to take all these great new security capabilities like TDX and put them in the hands of the ecosystem, put them in the hands of developers, so that we actually have something that customers can use on the first day of these products being available. Does all that make sense? Okay, good, because I think I just stole thunder from my last, okay, here we go, yeah. Good, because I just talked through this entire slide. That's how good I am, it's all in my head. I don't even need the slide. So did I touch on everything? Oh yeah, on the foundational performance. So in CentOS Stream, the magical thing about CentOS Stream is that it is a community that is building the next version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And you say, well, that's fine, Gunnar, but doesn't Red Hat completely control everything that goes into CentOS Stream? The answer is yes, because it is our product, and we are responsible for it when it ships. But CentOS Stream has the ability to create forks of itself in the form of special interest groups. And this is where the collaboration happens. We have a hyperscaler group, special interest group. We have a virtualization special interest group. We have now created an ISA special interest group. So folks who are interested in doing early enablement on the next ISA version, they can actually work in that fork of CentOS Stream, and any improvements can be folded back into the main line. Any improvements on virtualization, any improvements on security, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. So this is a place, and what's cool is this is the kind of collaboration we'd always wanted to do, And now not only do we get to do it, but we get to do it in public in a completely open and transparent way where everyone can watch us work and everyone has an opportunity to help, which is exactly what you need if you're trying to build out a larger ecosystem around a lot of these capabilities. Okay, that was a lot of words. I feel like I should pause there. Mark, do you have anything to improve? Chris, anything to improve on that?
No, that was great.
Okay, hear that? It was great.
Gunnar?
Yes, ma'am.
One impertinent question from the back of the room.
Sure.
We love Red Hat. I covered 20-some years of your annual meeting. But I do have to ask, in the age of multi-cloud,
Yeah.
and in the age of multi-hardware, everything you're doing here for an Intel platform,
Yeah.
you should also work on 2 or 3 other things.
Mhm.
So how, I'm just curious, so you have this collaboration, but how does it work the other way where the core Red Hat's gonna run on 3 or 4 other hardware types?
This is a fantastic question.
I'm sorry.
No, this is a great question because this you are describing the nightmare that is my life. This is the way I said in the panel earlier that it was Chris, you were running the panel.
Yeah.
I said in the last 10 years, the hardware market has gotten, the way I describe it at every conference is like the hardware market has gotten deeply weird. And there are a lot of the standards that we used to be able to rely on, a lot of the norms in the hardware market that we used to be able to rely on no longer exist anymore. And it's because the market will not tolerate, they need the innovation, right? And so we need to go, the investments that everyone is making in GPUs, the investments we're making in FPGAs, ASICs, all these accelerators are completely changing the hardware landscape. And I am in the unenviable position of hiding that from all the end users. A lot of people misunderstand what makes something Red Hat Enterprise Linux compatible as being like, oh, the entire stack, like all the way from the kernel on down. The dirty little secret is that we actually have 17 kernels running at any given time, accommodating all different kinds of hardware and all different kinds of life cycles and all the rest of it. But we make sure that it is all compatible with itself, right? And so, now I'm not saying the job is getting easier, I'm saying the job is getting a lot harder, but we do know how to do this, and the way that we do it is we declare compatibility at what we call the ABI layer, application binary interface layer. Yeah. And so as long as we can guarantee ABI compatibility, then that allows for portability of the application across different clouds, different hardware profiles, etc. Right? Yeah. It's not easy. I don't recommend anyone else try this. It's very expensive. It's very unpleasant to maintain.
That's great, thank you.
But it is important for the ecosystem, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna sit down, but I'm ready for the next question.
All right, well, if there's no immediate questions, and I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Chris Tobias, so I manage technology leadership. So collaboration with wonderful companies like Red Hat, all the way through, we have a bunch of solution architects on my team to help customers deploy in a heterogeneous compute environment downstream, which is one of the reasons when you heard one API we talked about earlier, that is a tool, no matter what environment people are using. If we go implement that, we know they'll get the best experience and we can start building up from there. So just to give a little framework, Gunnar gave a great kickoff. There's kind of 3 areas of big importance that we're looking at right now in the market. Artificial intelligence, it's like I'm kidding, just wake up, fall out of bed. The other ones are security, which you highlighted, so thank you, Gunnar, and then sustainability, because power budget is becoming just as important as the dollar budget nowadays in any sort of cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, edge to cloud, edge, however you want to deploy, that's just as important as the dollar budget. So I don't know if you want to give a few thoughts on those, and we can open up for some more general questions.
I got the thought, but I just was talking for a long time. Mark,
Well, yeah, I think hopefully if you saw Greg's keynote and Pat yesterday, we're continuing to build new hardware capabilities. And Gunnar was talking about, I think together, the hardware capabilities are getting more complex. TDX is a good example of that in terms of the different touch points in the stack. So I think just the ability for us to together build this in an early form, go out into the ecosystem, find joint customers that want to work with us on making sure that it can be deployed, it can be supported in production. I think that's going to be a super valuable part of this collaboration. Obviously when you mention sustainability, performance and sustainability are sort of deeply related. So I think getting getting the best out of the hardware that people have in terms of performance leads to better power consumption. Obviously, you can do work faster. So I think we're, again, excited about the ability to drive faster use of the hardware that's there. You know, the hardware evolves faster in terms of the ISA sometimes than the software ecosystem can absorb. So I think working together to increase the pace of that so that everybody can get the benefit out of the hardware. You know, there's performance left on the table because for compatibility reasons, as Greg mentioned, it's easier to build to the lowest common denominator, which is very old. You know, it's 10 plus years old. But if you want to get the best out of the latest hardware, you have to make that compromise of, I'm going to optimize for the latest generation, get better performance. You know, that particular binary won't run on an old system. But you know, that's another thing that we can do together, you know, in the ISA SIG, for example, where we can go explore, like, what are the workloads where this really benefits, again, with the customer saying, I'm going to get a big benefit out of this workload if we do this ISA work together. So I think that's going to be really exciting. And then on AI, of course, there's tremendous innovation there in terms of hardware and lots of new software. So the need to do that early, fast integration, I think, is really evident. Like, that world is evolving so fast. So being able to do that quickly, get it out into the hands of developers, get feedback, iterate on it. You know, we can't work at the old sort of very long enterprise cycle for that kind of a workload because it changes so fast. So I think it's a lot of really great potential in this collaboration from our point of view.
I'm just wondering, how mature are your customers to kind of recognise the value that they are getting from this partnership and, you know, sort of access, and, you know, where, you know, what roles do you see, you know, within the, you know, sort of your end user organisations? You know, have you seen a kind of maturity and evolution of the type of roles that are coming up that now sort of are much more kind of laser focused on that kind of getting, you know, sort of getting performance at a lower level than perhaps in the old days where, you know, the development audience might just go, I don't really care what goes on beyond the thing, I just want to do my application code and make it run. Whereas now I get the impression, both from a sustainability and obviously from an AI workload, that, you know, there may be a group of, you know, roles, if you can talk to those, you know, both whether within your organisation but also within your customer organisation. How far are we, you know, to kind of getting that kind of maturity, or is it really still early days?
Take it first? Okay.
Well, you know, go ahead.
No, this is a great question. I made a joke earlier about like in the security category, right? There have been security capabilities in the chips, and they've been in there for decades, right? And we haven't actually made full use of them. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, I think if I could go back in a time machine and do this again, I think I figured out what the problem is. The problem was we built it and we lit it up and we didn't tell anyone how to use it, right? And that's on both of us. Like, that's a fault of the partnership, right? And one of the things I heard in all the keynotes, in all the kind of keynote highlights today, and one thing that I've noticed in the collaboration we have with Intel now is that we are all now focused much more on, I'm going to call them three-way partnerships or three-way collaborations, whereas before we kind of looked at it as a two-way collaboration, right? And to the extent that we can invest in these three-way collaborations with an ISV, with a customer, with a partner, and figure out like, okay, well, they have this great capability, we figured out how to light it up efficiently and make it consumable, and so what are you going to do with it? And then they say, well, I could do this, but I need the button to be blue instead of purple. And okay, great, we're going to make the button blue instead of purple, and now you can make use of it. So I think that it's less about, it's true that AI is creating some like very specific needs, security is creating some very specific needs, certainly sustainability is creating specific needs, but I think that the problem that we are solving here has actually been general and it has been endemic. You know, this has been going on for a long time. Good news is the answer is the same, is partnering with the right set of folks in our ecosystem and both of us leaning on the ecosystem that we share in order to help a customer make the best use of the work that we've already done. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I was just wondering, I mean, you know, I guess to a certain extent that's great. I mean, how much will you then go? Because I know there was, sort of there was talk about, you know, sort of the training and having, you know, incredibly, you know, good certification. But whenever we speak to end user organisations, part of the fact is And I think you're right about not lightening it up and making it easy for, sort of them to really understand. But a lot of them are, sort of looking to getting, sort of opinionated, strategies. They don't know which roles that they should, have in place.
Yes.
A lot of them probably have some of those roles already in place, but they think they are, deployed, maybe not deployed in the right place.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how much of this could be seen as you, sort of raising and putting the spotlight on that, but also putting the training, framework in place, whether you do it yourself or you do it to a third party.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one, because I spent a lot of time in my role downstream, and this is where the keyword partnerships. So there's the technology partnerships upstream on developing the technology, making sure it goes well. And historically, every company kind of had their target segment, but today with edge to cloud, you have smart edge. I mean, everything's intertwined. So you have to think not only about, hey, what does my hardware build out look like from servers? It's going to be, what's my networking? What's my switching? Okay, when should I move? When should I move the data off the sensors at the edge to a local server? Okay, it's sitting there. How much compute do I need? Should I pay the latency penalty? Now people are starting to consider the power penalty of how much energy it costs to move that back to the data center, the dollar costs, just the economic factors, and then there's the technology factors of, is it secure when I move it back and forth between those locations? And guess what? This is a huge opportunity for all the partners, the system integrators, because people hear like, hey, I need to do generative AI, for example. So I need to go spend a bunch of money on systems that are going to take me a year to get, because that's what I'm hearing I need. They don't quite know what the problem is they're trying to solve. They just know they're at, hey, everybody else is doing this, I'm going to be at risk. What's the recommended architecture I could use? And we start to ask them questions like, okay, well, what problem are you trying to solve? I don't know, I just need generative AI. Well, are you looking at a chat bot to help prevent calls go to your actual live customer service rep? Are you training it on your own internal data? How many parameters do you think that is? There's other ways to solve that problem with the existing technology, and that's where we're really partnering up with system integrators. We actually partner up with Red Hat's doing the same thing. So we have our own direct sales channel. We also have our partnership channel, and recommended architectures just to get started on the basic problems is, hey, solve this problem first. Everybody needs to get a little bit of understanding, because with all these changes, and now we got multiple nodes, technology is changing faster than I've ever seen it since I've been in this industry. And it's ridiculously fast, nobody can keep up. The person on my team who leads AI, she was an expert in deep learning for 15 years on computer vision. She's like, Chris, anybody who says they're an AI expert is a liar, because it's being made up right now. So people are practicing it, they're the experts. Part of it is the learning, and then how do we get how do we work with partners to get something that's consumable to the end user using the latest and greatest technology. And it's actually a very, very big challenge, but it's a huge business opportunity to solve people's pain points. So it's a great question.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, other questions? We were talking about AI.
Yeah, so maybe this isn't the most appropriate question, but you're talking about Intel's talking about the developer cloud and how it's going to put everything in front of people up front and be able to get things developed quickly and the like. How does this relationship fit into that structure?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine, take TDX for example, we work with a joint customer and they want to try it out on some early systems. So they can get access to Emerald Rapids, which is our next Xeon, which has TDX in it, and they can go try that workload out in the cloud, and get familiar with it. We can bring the Red Hat, the CentOS stream build in there. So it gives us a place to do that sort of try it out live without having to ship them a box. It's a much faster, easier way to get that hardware in the hands of developers, users. Same for AI with our latest, accelerators. We've got those in the developer cloud. So I think it accelerates that whole cycle of, I've looked at something, I'm interested in it, I want to try it out. Okay, here you go. You can get access to a system or set of systems. Go try out your use case. I think that'll be a critical part of speeding up the whole cycle, having access to that hardware.
And the reason I ask it is because, I mean, Intel has so many partners in so many different areas that the developer cloud is terrific, but how all-encompassing is it if I really want to try something out, without having to go buy, having to go to buy a license from Red Hat, but, half a dozen other people as well.
Yeah.
How accelerating is it really if I can't get everything I need?
You can sort of bring I think in the early development stage, you bring that with you. We give you access to a system you can provision it with.
Bring your own.
Bring your own, early stack. And there are things that are pre-configured, but I think for something like, a CentOS stream builder would probably be something we would bring in and say, we're going to bring in this pre-release software and we're going to use the dev cloud as a means to test it out and try the use cases. So it kind of spans the range of, I want to use some already released stuff to, I'm using very cutting edge pre-release kind of early things.
And this is the value of CentOS Stream, by the way, is somebody could come in and do, if we're doing early enablement on something for something RHEL 10 or even RHEL 11, right, which is just feels like just around the corner from my point of view. We can actually bring in a Fedora release that we think is going to be close to RHEL 10 and let them try it out. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but at least we're finding out several years ahead of the actual, of them going into production, right? So in the same way that the developer cloud provides early access to the hardware, we have software communities that provide early access to the next version of RHEL, and it's a nice, it's a nice complementary.
And you're getting feedback as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both are.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
What are we missing? What haven't we thought about?
Yeah,
that's right.
The good news is it's always Mark's fault.
Blame the hardware.
There's a question in the back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, noting, of course, that this question is born completely out of ignorance, because I don't know anything about software development. But the fact that it takes years to get hardware features enabled in software scares the hell out of me, because I think about CentOS. I'm a security guy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, how do you do patching? What happens if you can't light up hardware features in 3 or 4 years?
Yeah.
What happens when a log4j happens?
Oh, yeah. So, first of all, I owe you $20 at the end of this because I have a ready-built answer for you. So the expectations are going to change. If you're working in an upstream project, that is going to move extremely quickly. A log4j shows up, they're going to patch it within hours or probably, at worst a couple days, right? Because that's how upstream communities work. That's the good news. The bad news is that they don't care whether they broke anything in fixing it, right? And so in Fedora, CentOS Stream, what they're doing is they're pulling down from the upstream communities, right? And if there's a log4j, if there's some security vulnerability, they will probably pull that in very quickly, right? In fact, they'll probably pull that in as soon as possible. When you move into a product that is being supported for a long period of time, like Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? I've got a 12-year life cycle, right? And one of the reasons why Red Hat has thousands of engineers is because, yes, we're innovating upstream, but we are also taking those fixes and then backporting them to the software that we have in a way that won't disrupt a workload that is already running. And so it's a different risk profile, right? Like I'm gonna favor stability, yes, I wanna go patch some vulnerability, but I don't want my database to go under, right? And so that is the kind of security response you're gonna get from a Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription. But if you're working in the upstream, if you want it extremely quickly, you're pulling directly from the upstream. If you want it a little bit more curated, you're going to get it from Fedora. If you want to make sure that, if you want to have good hygiene on a system that you're testing with a partner, then you're going to be using CentOS Stream. So it's just the responses change depending on which community you're working in. Yeah.
All right, we've been neglecting this side of the room recently. Any questions over here? Yes, in the back.
I just wondered about one API, whether you consider that an Intel initiative, or whether you consider it a more open standard across the industry, because you have partnerships with NVIDIA as well. I just wonder how you balance those things, and whether you really think one API is something that will take off, and you'll have a more open interface for most of the accelerators and GPUs.
Well, you probably heard this morning, the creation of the new foundation under the Linux Foundation to really bring it to be, a true industry effort. So I think that's a big step in that direction of, really moving it out under neutral governance. We're going to put all of our sort of open source project assets under that same governance. And you saw, you know, pretty wide breadth of industry partners stepping in to participate there. So certainly our intention is that it become an industry standard, that it's an open place for everybody to build sort of this interoperable layer that can span different hardware from different vendors. And you know, I think there's a really strong desire, we hear it from our customers every day, to get out of a proprietary jail they're in. It's a very painful place to be. So I think that's a step in that direction from our point of view.
Yeah, and I have to give Intel credit for doing that, right? Because moving that into the foundation is exactly what you do when you want something to be an industry standard, right? I mean, one APIs wasn't invented yesterday; it's been around for a while, and the act of putting it into the foundation was a great demonstration of their commitment to actually making it an industry-wide standard. So,
and I'll just add, like, because my team works downstream deploying with customers, and one of the costs they face, depending on, is, you know, they have to hire elite developers if you're going with a very narrow industry solution, and we'll show them performance on one API, and almost every case it's as good as or better than what they're using, and then they can free up those developers to work on higher value problems than just, you know, getting the basic hardware running. So it's very positively viewed in the industry, and it's viewed as a support for a heterogeneous compute. And I think this is a very logical next step to get complete industry-wide participation. So I'm personally very excited about it. All right, other questions from this side of the room?
Well,
Yes.
Possibly with Pat surprising us yesterday with a 288 core Xeon, for example.
Yeah.
One of the slowest moving things in the industry is the commercial model and licensing, etc. How do you think you can encourage your partnership with ISVs and others who are all trying to build on this to move with the times and have a simpler way to engage rather than having a licensing model built for the 90s?
Oh, a per core licensing model, you mean? Is that what you're talking about?
Or just things like that there's a lot of licensing
Yeah.
still built around
That's
age-old
true.
assumptions.
Yeah, it's something we're certainly talking with our ecosystem partners about in terms of how to think about, I mean, it's not just on our platform, everyone's platform core count is going up dramatically. So they have to sort of move with the times, I think, in terms of what's the value they're delivering, and is it aligned with, you know, customer expectations in terms of, you know, you can't have a backwards looking per core licensing model and apply that to a dramatically higher core count platform. I mean, those economics just, they don't work. So I think the market will fix itself for the most part there.
That's what I've heard for 20 years.
We'll see.
I'll just interject. So since I work with many software companies, the good news is everybody has to have a cloud, you know, consumption model pricing, and because they're evolving, everyone's evolving their pricing and how they price. It means they can look at, okay, the beginning to end of how to do this, and what everyone's realizing is the market's changing super fast, and they're trying to build in some boundaries to look at, okay, I gotta be in a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, edge to cloud environment. Cores are going like crazy, you know, some people look at memory or whatever, and everyone's reevaluating how they price. And you know, it's gonna all be up to their own software company's decision on how they do that. But they're looking at how can I provide the engineering service? You know, hey, the old 20-year-old models, like, I'll sell you this license around this software drop, which supports this hardware. It was all kind of aligned, but now it's like, I give you some money, make sure I don't have problems. And so how that works, it's everybody's looking at. So I feel like it's a solvable problem, and people, once you open up that process to fix, you can come up with solutions with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add.
I have nothing to add that won't incriminate me. I think it is an extremely hard problem, and I will say, and there is nowhere to hide. Like, I haven't seen a given unit of measure. Like, there is no as you say, the market will work it out. It has absolutely not worked it out yet, right? I've seen experiments with core counts and memory, and like I do socket pairs, and yeah, there's nowhere to hide. It's all going to change, right? Because it's obviously not sustainable for all the reasons you just talked about, right?
I just wondered, add a little something, because it's on the screen as well, about OpenShift. When you think about Red Hat,
Yeah.
think about RHEL,
Yep.
then you think about OpenShift. Just any enhancements there for how those guys work together?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm the RHEL guy, so of course I'm going to tell the RHEL part of the story. So thanks for correcting me. But all of the benefits that I just described immediately accrue to OpenShift as well, right? So as I light up, as I light up Gaudi, right, that becomes now available to OpenShift as a computing resource, right? This is kind of how we've constructed the Red Hat environment. I think that there is. We talked about sustainability earlier. We do have a project called Kepler, which I think we're working together on, right?
We are.
Okay, good. Because that was going to be awkward if we weren't working on it here. But so we have this project called Kepler, which is not meant to solve a sustainability problem, but at least provide visibility into, which is actually the first problem in the sustainability question, is people have no idea what instrumentation they should be using, right? Let alone like where to set targets and how to manage them, right? And so Kepler is specifically for OpenShift. Of course, there's benefits to Red Hat Enterprise Linux as well, and that provides more visibility into the OpenShift Kubernetes environment, help people do power management across their Kubernetes clusters, right?
How's the feedback of OpenVino regards the Red Hat from about the feedback from Red Hat users?
Well, so I mentioned my good friends at Guys AI, who are actually in our booth right on the floor. You can ask them; they enjoy it. It's right there in their architecture diagram. The feedback has been extremely good, and like I said, we've seen. We talked about this earlier today. I think we hear AI, and there's all this talk about the AI and the GPUs and the large language models and all the rest of it. For me, as the RHEL guy, the action is like, yeah, that's all interesting and that's all super important, but the real action is actually on the inferencing side, right? That's where a lot of the really interesting applications are happening. That's where the action is, and so we're really excited about being able to. That's one of the reasons why I said I was excited about OpenVino, is because it makes these workloads practical for a lot of folks in a way that they weren't before, right?
Yeah, I think it also highlights, OpenVino kind of started at the edge, but it's also now being applied in the data center.
Yeah.
But one of the things that tends to get ignored in our work together with Red Hat, and Gunnar touched on it earlier, was, hey, at the edge, people had this direct software stack. So you could have billions of dollars of hardware that you have to replace because some control boards and software to run it were written in the 80s or even worse, the 70s or whatever. And everybody's retired. Nobody knows how to run it. The 3 consultants left. I'll do that for $10 million or whatever. But eventually they're all gone. So going to a containerized infrastructure at the edge, and then using some of these tools helps facilitate that problem. So OpenVino has actually kind of helped accelerate that kind of architecture, and it works where we're all trying to go. So it's very kind of synergistic.
Sorry, I want to improve on that, and I want to connect it back to the OpenShift question. One thing I've absolutely seen from, let's say internally, I would say the majority of customers now I talked about how weird the hardware environment is. One of the ways that customers are managing this is they are using containers to insulate themselves from any of the hardware questions, right? Of course, they want to descend from the container and down and go take advantage of whatever capabilities they want, but to the extent possible, they are abstracting themselves away from their infrastructure choices for exactly those reasons, right? They're trying to create some stability. They're trying to draw a line and say, okay, I'm going to standardize everything underneath here, and then I'm going to innovate everything on top. And the dividing line for most customers is about at the container boundary, right? That's where it's happening.
So, in conjunction with that, is there any role for some sort of intermediary language like Microsoft has with its common language runtime?
I don't know, Mark. What do you think?
Well, I think there's lots of, like in the AI space, you've probably seen MLIR, and there's tons of new language framework things are going on. I don't think there will be one. There are many, and there will be more. And I think the containerization is one way to help manage. Like, I'm going to curate a specific set of things for the moment, that rapid, because it's changing so fast. And I can run that container on top of a much more stable RHEL, and I can just iterate inside the container that I'm sort of managing myself. So I think we're seeing that happen for sure. Yeah.
I think we have one more.
Sorry.
We have time for one more.
A follow-up question about, I heard a lot about how this the developer side, you need to provide a lot of new tools for them because of the AI thing, and also how to make clear for them that what do you have. And on the other side, it's, for you guys, it's I think this business, this industry is already very fragmented. So after the AI thing, that I feel that it becomes more and more fragmented. So is this something that will bring some impact on the business model that you shared?
That's a huge question. That's a big one. Like I said before, I think there is fragmentation in the market right now, but that is because the market is innovating in a way that it hasn't in a long time. You mentioned this earlier, Chris. I mean, things are moving faster than we've ever seen before, so naturally it's going to be fragmented, right? As an operating system guy with an ecosystem of hardware and ISVs to take care of, this is kind of my central challenge, right? Is finding a way to make everything stable, consumable, and coherent, so that people don't get lost in the chaos of the hardware innovation, chaos of the software innovation, the rest of it. They need, more than any other time in the past, they need a stable platform that they can rely on, and this is one of the reasons why in the Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, why we announced a stable release cycle. So we're releasing a new version of RHEL every 3 years, whether we need it or not. And the reason why we're doing that is because we need a predictable cadence for innovation, so that people can plan their data set. And now I've talked to, I talked to large customers who now have, because we have made that decision, they can now actually make plans, despite the innovation, despite the chaos, they can plan their investments out 10, 15 years in the future, and they find that extremely comforting, right?
So you need to set a tempo.
I'm sorry?
You need to set a tempo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. And that allows the innovation to happen on top without sacrificing the stability.
Anybody that's setting a plan 10 or 15 years in advance is nuts. Ain't gonna happen.
Tell that to my lifecycle product manager.
You may not know what's going to be in the release, but there will be one.
I've got spreadsheets that would make your eyes bleed.
Well, I think that's all we have time for. Oh, maybe we have time for one more?
One more.
Come on, make it a good one.
Do we think the key level of interoperability for AI and ML is more likely to be like the language level, at the high level framework level, or at like a sort of translation toolkit, start compiler, start SDK level?
Right. What level? So put another way, you're asking what layer is AI going to standardize on? Is it going to be at the runtime layer, at the language layer, at the all of them? It's going to be, and I think for the foreseeable future, I think it's going to be different answers to different problems at different levels in the stack. And this is one of the reasons why the world is so chaotic and fragmented right now, is because I don't think anybody knows how this is going to resolve.
Yeah, I totally agree with that answer.